Okay, well, good evening, Lisan, and thank you
Okay.
for being here. And welcome to this last webinar, webinar number 7 of this module of facilities management, where, well, basically, the objective of this webinar was to go through the activities of due to on phase number 4, the last phase of the module. But before that, I don't know if you had any doubts. Honestly, I have not checked if you have already submitted activity number 5 or not. So uh, if not, no problem, obviously, because there's no pressure on that. But just the question is, if you have any questions or any doubts in relation to this activity?
Uh, no, I am fairly clear with what's required of me, uh, even with the subject.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I'm primarily here to basically pick your brain going forward. The materials that we've covered so far, or the ones that I've gotten to reading so far, I'm okay with.
Okay. Okay, great. So, if what the objective of today, it's going to be probably a shorter webinar than the previous ones. It is to go through the activities of this phase 4, which, as you will see, they are pretty straightforward and much less complicated than the one we did in the previous phase. Yeah. So, I'm going to share screen with you, and we're going to go through this case study, which is the case study number 3, and it is the case study that it's related to the activity number 6 of this phase. Yes, this is basically a case study developed by Curve Institute in relation to a very, let's say, peculiar or very specific football club, soccer club in Spain. Whereas you probably know, it's one of the most, I don't know if competitive, but at least professionalized, and where there's more money in all Europe in terms of football. Together, probably with the Italian and the Premier in England, they are the 3 leagues that there's more money in the business of football. Yeah. So in the first division of La Liga in Spain. We have a club, Athletic Club de Bilbao, which is based at the north of Spain in the city of Bilbao, which has a lot of peculiarities, and it's a very distinctive club. Probably difficult to find something similar all over Europe. Yes, the main trait of this club, it is that they have decided since their foundation back in the early century of 1900 century, that they are not gonna have players outside of the area of the Basque Country, which is where the Bilbao city is, and the region. So no player in the club, in the team, in the first team, or in any team, um, comes from any other place in the world that is not in the Basque Country. Yeah. So Basque Country, it's a very small piece of land with probably about 3 or 4 million inhabitants maximum, and obviously that is a really big challenge for the managers of the club, because in a place or in a world where you can hire or contract the best player in Asia, in South America, in the States, and bring them and pay them a huge salary and so on, you end up making teams which are completely stratospheric in terms of the players they play. Yeah, Paris Saint-Germain, Football Club Barcelona, Real Madrid, Chelsea, Manchester City, whatever. Yeah, so this club, obviously, with this philosophy, is not intending to compete at this level of the best soccer teams in the world, but they managed to stay always in the first division, which is a highly competitive, as I said, competition, and at the same time they maintain this criteria of making sure that no player that they have comes from abroad. And obviously that has a counterpart, or a good part of it, which is that they have a really high sense of community, and the people living in Bilbao is really, almost all of them, really well identified with the club. Yeah, so this has an impact on the business model of the club. They are aware of that, obviously. So the case study in this activity number 6, which I think it's quite fun, it is to go through these 20 pages of this case, which you will see that we'll go through very briefly now, but you'll see that they are very straightforward and very even fun to read because there's a lot of infographics and a lot of charts and so on. So to go through the business model, and at the end of the same business model, you'll find 5 questions, and the idea is to answer these 5 questions. Yeah, so let's go through a little bit the main elements of this case study. Well, as you know, the Basque Country, it's at the north of Spain. There's even a part of the Basque Country which it's in actually it's in France, and it's French. Yeah, but that for historical reasons, the Basque Country has almost all its part in Spain, but also a part of it which is in the French in France, in the French country. Yeah, and here you can see this is okay. This case study ends up in the season 2016-2017, but from this season today till today, the results has been quite similar. Where, as you can see, out of the 20 teams that there's in the first division of La Liga in Spain, they always manage to end up between between the fifth, sixth, and the 12th. Yeah, so they are always at the medium table, probably a high part of this medium table. From time to time, they manage to qualify for the Champions League, which you go the first 4 teams of the league. They play the Champions League, and obviously that's an important amount of money extra that it comes into. But if not, they usually manage to play the Europa League, which would be the second level of these European competitions. And there's many more teams that can play in this Europa League. Yeah, so basically this is the situation of Athletic Club de Bilbao, and honestly, it is quite surprising that they keep, let's say, the chances of being at least to play in Europe every year, and obviously never having problems to be relegated, because the last 2 teams of La Liga always go to second division, and 2 teams from second division come up to the first division. It's not a closed league, so it's really quite amazing how do they manage to do that. Yeah, in terms of the case study, obviously, it will be much more directed towards the stadium and its capacity. Yes, and some of the thoughts that we discussed last week with Lucas in relation to another first division club, which was Real Club Deportivo Español, and the fact of having to fill up that stadium that was brand new, or it is brand new, and it is quite big. It's quite similar to here. Yeah, the great difference here it is that well, as you can see in season 2014-2015, they made the stadium bigger, and its capacity it raised from 41,000 to 49,000, or almost 50,000 people. So really, they enlarged their stadium because they felt that in some seasons they really almost raised the 100% of its capacity. Yeah. So an interesting thing here it is that if you compare this graph where you can see the stadium attendance or the average attendance with the results that they have every year, it's not really dependent on the result of the team, the fact of having the stadium full or not, which is quite interesting. If we go to other clubs, such as the one that I stated before, Real Club Deportivo Español, or other medium table clubs in Spain, they are really dependent on the success of the team in that season, and if they are playing well and they are winning games or not. Yeah, this is very different here, and this is probably one of the elements, the positive elements that they have of this fact of being such peculiar and very identified with the community, that no matter what happens, no matter if they win or they lose, they are going to have the stadium pretty full and almost at its highest capacity. So that's a very good element in terms of, let's say, relationship with citizenship, but at the same time, obviously, in terms of income, because that generates an important source of income within the P&L account. Yes.
A quick question.
Sure. Sure.
Is there any other club from the Basque Country that's competing in the La Liga
Yes.
that share the same region or city?
In the same city, no. In Bilbao, no. But there's the second big city in the Basque Country, which is San Sebastian or Donosti. Probably you've heard about it because it's a very nice city. Exactly. So over there's another team called Real Sociedad that they play also in the first division. Yeah, they used to have this policy, but they changed it maybe 10, 15 years ago. And they decided they could hire players from all over the world. Yeah, so now it's this element doesn't have it anymore. And yeah, so they have one other team that it's more or less competing at the same level. And then in the last 2 seasons, they have a new club which is called Eibar, which is such a smaller city that it was a club or a team that had always been the last 40 years playing at the second division, and they have managed to come up to the first division, and they are playing not to go down every year, but they are there. Yeah, so
Eibar, right?
Eibar, yes, Eibar. It's spelled EIBAR.
Yeah.
And this team, it's a different level, but they managed to stay there and to play at this first division, which this is probably one of the elements. That was a very good question, because that's probably one of the elements to take into account when answering the questions, as we will see afterwards. Yeah. So yes, right now there are 3 teams, and traditionally there has always been 2 teams at this first division. Yeah. Well, you can see here in this graph that once they enlarged the stadium, obviously they increased a little bit the average attendance, but they keep a steady around this 40,000. So they moved up from 35 to 40,000. And an important element it is that apart from the average attendance to the field, they increased the club members. So in many other places, club members, they have access and a seat in the stadium, so they can go and watch the games because they pay this annual membership and they have access to it. Yeah. Just to, let's say, complete a little bit the summary, here you can see a structure which is very typical and very common in any, I would say, top level football team or football club in, I would say, all over Europe today, nowadays, which is most of their revenue comes from TV rights or broadcasting. Yeah, so this is this light green area where you can see that in Spain, at least now, there's not that much dependency on the results during the league, but on how the TV rights, which is an enormous amount of money, they share it or between the different clubs. Yeah, so that's good because they give some stability to the clubs, but at the same time, it's quite dangerous because obviously if these broadcasting rights and money that it's behind goes down because the sponsor doesn't pay, then they're gonna have not them but all of them problems in terms of finance. Yes, the interesting thing here it is that. If you can see the gray membership revenue, it is quite high compared to other clubs. Yeah. So if we move away from Madrid and Barcelona, which are, let's say, multinationals, and they have obviously lots of revenues from different perspectives. If we go to the rest of the clubs in Spain, they have much more dependence on broadcasting rights, TV rights. So it is good for and in this case in Athletic de Bilbao to have much more diversified lines of revenue, which at the end of the day gives a lot of stability, as we will see now, and a lot of wealth in terms of economics. Yeah.
Just a quick
One
question.
thing. Sure. Listen.
Distribution of TV rights or television money. Is it what is it based on? Is it by 10? How does it get distributed? Do all clubs have the access to the same amount of money?
Yeah, that's very interesting because probably not that much time, 6-8 years ago, what they did, the clubs, it is they meet themselves and then they decide how to let's say share this amount of money that comes from TV rights. Yes, what happened that obviously that has been boomed after this pay-per-view, and you have to pay to see some games and so on. So what Real Madrid and Barcelona said was, okay, people pays to watch us against any other teams. So we want the big part of the cake because we are the ones that these people is paying for. Yeah. So this lasted for 2-3 years, and then what happened from the government? They said, okay, that's not fair, and also that's going to be a problem. As you know, in Spain, football or soccer, it's kind of a state element. Yeah, so it's very important for everybody. So they said, okay, that's going to be a problem because, okay, we're going to have a highly competitive teams in Europe like Barcelona and Madrid, but the problem is that our national league is going to be very undervalued because there's only going to be 2 teams always winning, probably similar to what happens to in France, for instance. Yeah, and then there's going to be a lot of teams over there that no one is going to want to watch them on TV, and probably only people living in that city will be keen on looking at that game. Yeah, so they created a law, an act, where they decided that this sharing of the amount of money of the total income that TV rights generated, it had to be much more equitative, and they did it by law, which was quite amazing. And today, the system is much more similar to the one that they have in England, where the lowest team in the in the first division or the Premier League as well gets obviously gets a little bit less of money than Real Madrid or Barcelona that always finish in the top 3 or top 4, but not that the difference is not that big. So they managed to be competitive and to hire good players, even the teams that they are in the bottom of the league. Yeah, so this is the way that it is structured. It is quite complicated in terms of there are different items. One of the items, obviously, if is they playing in Europe or not. Another item is the amount of the results that they have, the total budget that they have when hiring players. So there are different items that generate this criteria to share all this amount of money that coming from the private companies that they are the broadcasting TV rights companies.
So it means the type of player or the profile of the player a club signs without his success, specifically in that club, it is considered basically an asset when it comes to this distribution of TV money. Is that how I'm understanding it?
Yeah, could be. Yeah, could be understood like that. Yeah. So the level of budget that the club has an impact on the way of the TV rights are distributed, or say the other way around. The TV rights are going to account for a specific percentage of the total budget of the club. Yeah, so it's probably the same. Yeah. So yeah, definitely it has an impact on that.
It's a bit different. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, the point is probably for the good of the sport in the country that we're talking about elite sport, it is that the difference between the top teams and the bottom teams in terms of revenue distribution of broadcasting was much more equitative, which was at the end of the day, it's been shown that it's been very, very good for the teams. Yeah. Here, as I said before, one thing that the club has not managed to increase, although it is a very low part of income in the total income, it is the sales of the merchandising that the club is able to generate. Yeah, so you can see here it's around this 5,000, so it has kept steady all over time. So let's say all the income that they generate during the match day, all the TV, all the shirts, that the players they sell and so on, that's not an important element, probably because they don't have that mediatic players such as Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo or one of these top players that only themselves they sell millions of shirts and so on. Yeah, so probably that's a counterpart on that. And
Yeah, so the going back to the commercial revenue is like the goods and services that the club sells, which is from the previous sales of goods. From the previous chart or graph, I've noticed that the commercial revenue of the club here, right here, seems to be very slim. Is that
yeah.
is that the one that's corresponding to what we were looking at just now, right?
Yes, exactly. This commercial part is the one that we can see it. It here is in blue, and here is in it's in blue as well.
Blue as
Yeah,
well.
this is around 5,000, which is this 5,000 here. Yeah. Which, as you can see, that's not a big deal for the club in terms of management because it's whether they increase it to 20% or not, the impact is very low. Yeah, compared to other elements that they have above. Yeah. So one important thing it is that since they don't hire top players, their salaries is in relation to the total revenue, it keeps quite steady around this 60%. There was an increase in 2010, but probably because one player or something like this. I don't know exactly the reason, but as you can see, it keeps quite steady. So from the managerial point of view, that's quite interesting because what it helps is to be able to plan with much more, let's say, possibility to be sure what's going to happen. Yeah, as you know, in the sports industry, not only football, you depend a lot on the results and you depend a lot on the media. So if you have quite a stability in the most important area of expenses, which is obviously the salaries of the players, that's good, and it's good news for the managers. Yeah. Well, here is the total expenditure that they have. That complements a little bit the chart before. Here you can see much more as a general information the number of players per season that they have on the first team. So it is interesting to see how probably the last season was an exception, but the level or the number of players that they are being transferred from other clubs, obviously that they have to be from the Basque Country or players that they were born in the Basque Country, it is not very high. Yeah, so on saying it in another way, it is that these academy players, all the players that they have in the teams, in the youth teams of the club, they need to generate lots of players almost every year, between 2, 3, 4, which is a lot in a professional sports club, to make sure that they keep this competitive level. Yeah, and that's one of the things that we are gonna go through when we go to the questions or to the items requested, because that's really a big challenge. Because what happens if during 3 or 4 years no one is sufficiently good to play on the first team? Yeah, obviously they will have to hire abroad, but they cannot hire outside of the Basque Country. So it poses a great challenge to the sports managers in this case. Yeah.
But I see them bringing up the player that they've sold. They usually call them back at Bilbao when they're
exactly. Yeah. Also, when they have a very good player, that's one of the threats as well. Because they have been able to promote or to generate very good players, top players that they play in the National League, or even, for instance, the most expensive transfer in a goalkeeper was Kepa. That was transferred. I think it was to Manchester City, or I don't know. And it was from Bilbao. So that year they generated an impact in the income very, very high because they made a lot of money with this transfer. Yeah. So the fact of having these players promoted also generates let's say less expenditure in hiring players, obviously. Yeah, but this means that they have to manage very well the academy to make sure that they have all the time generating new players at a good level. Here, as I say, you have more more information in relation to the numbers, which you will see. Depth, as you can see, it's very low, and obviously equity is going up. So it's a very wealthy club in terms of equity. They don't have almost any debt, and they are really in a very good position to to compete in terms of the business model. The problem it is that can they manage to raise their sports level according to these values and philosophy they have behind. Yeah. So let me go through this kind of infographics where here you can see that almost 50% of their income comes from, as I said, the broadcasting, and then it would be round numbers 25%, a quarter from fans and a quarter from competition. Competition means that obviously if they are able to compete in Europe, they generate much more income depending on the games they win and so on. So this 27% at the bottom, it's quite fluctuant, and it's the one that it's depending on a little bit even in the luck of the team. But the 75 or 73%, it's quite manageable. Yeah, and on the other hand, in terms of expenditure, almost 80% it goes to sporting salaries, whether they are players or staff and so on. So really, that would be a percentage even a little bit lower than other clubs, but it would be more or less on the average. Yeah. So that's the way that a professional football club it's managed. One thing that I didn't tell you it is that according to the law in Spain, all the clubs need to be sporting companies, so they are being public. And there's only 3 exceptions, which is Barcelona, Real Madrid, and Athletic Club de Bilbao. So these 3 clubs, they are still non-for-profit organizations. Yeah. So here the concept of non-for-profit is quite strange. Yeah. But to understand it, they don't generate profit, but they generate an amount of money that they have to reinvest it in the club or just keep it for next years. Yes. But conceptually, there's not really a profitable a business behind. Yeah. So once we have seen a little bit of all this, there's basically in relation to the activity 5 key questions to be answered. Yeah. This activity is based to be developed on a team. So I don't know if you're doing it alone or with a team. Listen.
I would like to talk to you about this in a bit.
Okay.
I'm probably going to do it personally.
Sure. Then okay. So basically, this would be a team activity if you want, or an individual activity, but you should have to answer these 5 questions. The first is, what are the main threads of the club's business model in the short term? Short term means in the next 2 or 3 years, in relation to how this club is structured and the business model and the revenues they have. Yeah. So this would be one of the first question. The second one would be, okay, we are depending on local talent, we're depending on youth. So how we can prevent a potential talent drain? Yeah. So I'll give you some ideas. Maybe obviously there are plenty of amateur football clubs in the area that they are not obviously playing at the first division, but they have lots of teams of youth and even adulthood teams that they play for fun or they play in a lower divisions. So
I have just the way of understanding this. They have a player named Iñaki Williams.
Yes.
He obviously not from the Basque, but he's probably raised there. So I'm trying to understand the depth of their commitment to this local talent, because are they saying a player has to be born and raised in a Basque country, or are they saying a person has to be of a Basque origin?
Yeah, that's very interesting, and they kind of let's say sometimes they have to flexibilize a little bit that maybe they had also a player from I think it was Uruguay that their parents were from the Basque Country, so they considered him Basque, which is a little bit. So they play a little bit, but again, the community is really on that, and they say, oh no, this is not a player eligible, or this it is. Yeah, so they have some things. You could not be born in the Basque Country but live there since you were 5 years old, and then you could be considered a player for Athletic Club de Bilbao. Obviously you were born there, but then you studied abroad and you come back, obviously you are from Basque Country. So there are some criteria that they have let's say developed, and they keep developing over time. Yeah.
Okay.
So the third question would be in such an environment with high connection with the club members, what could they do to try to increase a little bit the attendance of these non-member fans, taking into account that probably it's not something that really concerns them a lot, because in terms of income that's not very important. Probably in terms of support, the player number 12 that we say here in Spain, which is the support when you play home, that field, and it's very difficult to win them home, and that's key for them not to lose the division. So really, it is important to have, or to try to keep the stadium as full as possible, not for the income part, also it is important, but especially for the pressure to the other team when they are playing. Yeah. And fourth question would be, which would be the best strategies for the club to allocate the profits. As I said, they are not technically profits, but this extent of money that they have. So what do you think they could do according to the case study to develop that? And finally, the last one, it is a very let's say tricky question, which is if you were the maximum responsible of the club. Obviously, in these organizations, there's not only one person, but just imagine that you were that person. Would you try to change this transfer philosophy? So that means that here is, would you try to change this element of hiring people that can be from anywhere in the world and not only from the Basque Country? And obviously, you have to give reasons for that, if it's yes or if it's not. Yeah. So as you can see, the questions are quite open, and the important thing here is that we are, or I am not requesting to any of you to look for information out of this case study. Yeah, any professional sport has lots of impacts on media. They have specialized webs. There's a lot of information even in the web page of the club. So you can do it if you want, but the objective of this case, and taking into account that the previous activity was quite complicated already, it is that you just go through this activity. Obviously, if you have any questions, you can check other sources of information or just contact me, and then try to answer according to what you have read these 5 questions. Nothing more and nothing less, because this could be an activity that it would never end up, because you may find different opinions from different people, thinking A, thinking B, or thinking whatever. So no problem on that at all. Yeah. So this would be basically activity number 6, and let me go and come back to you here. And so this would be the activity. It should not take too much time to go through that, and I think it's quite fun, especially for football fans. And then the last activity, it's activity number 7. That's an exam. When you say the word exam, sometimes it sounds very bad, but it's not a big deal. As you will see, it's obviously an exam that you can do it with your notes on the computer, so no problem on that. And there are some important elements to take into account when developing the exam. The exam is as soon as it gets open, that I think it's going to be on Sunday, because that's Lucas who's controlling that. You will have 50 minutes to answer the 5 questions they have. Yeah, so it's going to be an exam with 5 questions, open questions, and each question accounts for 20% of the total mark. And the most important thing it is that you will have these 50 minutes to answer the exam. So what I would recommend it is on one side, you open a Word document or a text document and you just answer the questions in this Word document, because just in case you have any problems in, I don't know, in connection or with the campus or whatever, if you get disconnected, you're going to lose the information you have written already. So if it's good, it is good to do it in a Word document, and then just copy paste and put it on the platform. Another element it is that if you stay a long time without interacting with the platform understands that you have left and they disconnect you automatically. So that's an important element. If you start working with the Word and from time to time, every 3, 4, 5 minutes, you just, I don't know, move a little bit the platform, it's going to get disconnected. And then since it's an exam that you can only open it once, and as when you start, you have to finish in a row. You cannot go and do the first question and then tomorrow do the second one and so on. That has generated problems in the past. So it is important to remember to from time to time to refresh a little bit the platform to make sure that the computer doesn't understand that you have left the computer open. Yeah, and that's it. It's not a big deal. You will see that the exam accounts in the overall mark of the module as I think it's 15%. So it's not a very important mark all over the entire module. And well, feel free to develop it when you have 50 minutes, 1 hour, probably 1 hour that you are sure that you're going to have any interruptions. You go, you start, you finish, and that's it. Yeah. Okay, so that would be it. Apart from the question that we're going to discuss now, once we start, we finish recording, do you have any, let's say, general questions in relation to previous activities or to these two that we have just discussed now?
What we discussed today is fairly clear. Material is clear. I have no problem with the materials. The other things that I would like to discuss with you is a bit of how we're doing things. So after the recording, maybe.
Okay. All right. Well, then, thank you. Listen, I'm going to stop the recording. Don't switch off, and we'll keep in touch. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.